I automate business workflows for a living, but not every task needs to be automated. Some things genuinely need a human. But there are three signs that show that a task is practically begging to be automated, yet they're easy to miss. Hey, my name's Ivan, and I've delivered over 20 automation projects for businesses in various niches, from e-commerce to recruitment to real estate and many others. After a while, I started seeing patterns. So these tasks that give the biggest payoffs, that are easiest to automate, all have similar traits. So by the end of this video, you'll have a simple 3-step filter you can use in your own business to decide if something is worth automating. And I'll give you practical examples of each so you can see what that looks like in practice. So the first sign is the most obvious one, and that is that the steps are predictable and that they're the same every time. So I was working with a recruiter that was repeating the same process every morning. They were looking for hiring signals from companies. These are things like the company has just raised some funding, they're expanding into a new territory, they have changed somebody in the leadership position that makes it likely they're going to be hiring a new team. Once found, they would be looking for the relevant hiring managers in those departments of the companies. Then they would be doing research on them to understand more about them, to be able to do but personalized outreach. And then finally, they would be trying to find contact details for them and write them messages. This was taking a lot of time every morning. And to make things worse, when things would get busy in the business, they would simply drop this because it always felt like the least urgent thing, even though it was very important. So I automated the process for them by building a system that finds those hiring signals, figures out who those hiring managers are, finds their contact details, researches them, and then drafts the first initial outreach message. So this shortens the process from about 1 to 1.5 hours to only a few minutes of reviewing what the system comes up with and approving those outreach messages. More importantly, because the process is now that much shorter, it's less likely they're going to miss it when things get busy. So the test is simple. Could you write down a list of steps for the task you're considering? And would those steps be the same tomorrow and next week and so on? If yes, then that's a really good first sign. Sign is about moving data and transforming data instead of making decisions. There's an important distinction between tasks that involve moving and transforming data and those that require an actual judgment and decision making. AI and automation in general is great at the first one, not that great, at least not yet, at the second. So I worked with an e-commerce company that was spending roughly 2 to 3 hours publishing each product to their website. They would get a specification spreadsheet, they would read the specs that are relevant, they would get product photos mixed up with some other photos of the product, they would get the user's manual and so on. And then they would have to extract the information such as specifications, sizes, weights, materials, and then define the categories, define the tags, write SEO optimized descriptions, and so on. And all of these steps were very much repetitive and the same every single time for every single product. They felt like genuine qualified work because they require attention. Every single spreadsheet is slightly different, the data can be slightly off, but in reality, it's still all just data transformation. There's no judgment or decisions to be made here besides the very basic ones, such as, does this make sense, and is this value properly formatted? Does it fall within the limits of this particular item that we're dealing with? And so we automated this whole pipeline. The system reads a directory that contains all of the information I mentioned, such as the spreadsheet, manual, photos, and so on, extracts the relevant information, assigns all the different connections and parts of data in Shopify, writes the description, and publishes the product to the store. So the whole process that was taking them 2 to 3 hours now takes a few minutes, but again, this is few minutes of a machine time, not somebody actively working on this. So this was about 1,600 hours per year saved. And the test for this is whether your task involves transforming, filtering, or moving data between systems. And if so, that's a really good candidate for automating it. But there's one more sign, and that's the one that determines whether the automation is actually worth building or not. And that one is, can you stop doing it? So what I mean by that is there are some tasks that are annoying to do, but they're low stakes. If you stop doing them for a day or a week, nothing really happens. And then there are tasks that cannot be stopped that you have to keep doing if you want to keep your business running. So if it's the former, if it's just annoying, but it's not really that important, it's probably not worth the effort and cost of automating. But if it's something that cannot be left out, that just has to keep happening, then it might well be a good candidate. So here's an example. A medical practice I worked with would spend several hours at the end of each month generating invoices for their doctors. So they would have to go through their task management system, find all the tasks that were completed by each doctor during that month, calculate the fees, put that into a spreadsheet, and then generate the invoice in their accounting software, email this to the doctor, and then finally archive everything. Now, this is not something you can just decide not to do. You can't just stop paying your doctors. And so this task has real consequences to it. Those consequences don't have to be dramatic. It can be lost leads, annoyed customers, or just a pile of work that keeps growing and growing until eventually you have to deal with it. So here's the test. If you stop doing this for a week or two, would anything break? Would you lose revenue, lose your customers? Would you annoy them? Would something stop working in your business and cause a crisis? If yes, that's sign number 3. So now you have all 3. And here is something practical. Pick one task you do this week and write down the answers to 3 questions. Is it repetitive and predictable? Is it about moving data and not making judgments and decisions? And does it have real consequences? And if the answer to all 3 is yes, then you have a really good candidate for something that's worth automating. That's usually the one that's going to give you the biggest return for the least complexity. And most businesses have at least 2 or 3 of these that are worth doing. I'm curious what that looks like in your business. Drop it in the comments below.